All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. It's your host Tavares here, and today I think you guys are in for a treat. So I've spoken to this gentleman, and he's doing a great work over in Canada, and he's helping men break free from pornography. So I know a lot of our listeners are women. However, I do believe there's a lot in store, especially for our fellas, but a lot of you ladies, in order to know how to navigate some of these relationships, and some of you are going to take away some tools as well, because pornography is not a man issue, it's a lust issue. So as you are listening today, we have Sathiya. I'm going to have him introduce a little bit about himself. He's the author of a book, The Last Relapse, also a podcast host, Unleashing the Man Within. Man, you should subscribe. It's a daily podcast. Also founder of Deep Cleaning, which is a coaching program to help men break free from pornography and perversion. So, Sathiya, thank you for coming on, bro. I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tavares.
Yeah, man. So the people are interested. They never heard of you yet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, bro.
Yeah, you gave me a pretty solid intro, but a little bit of background. I'm a fourth generation pastor, so grew up as a pastor's kid,
Oh,
Christian
wow.
school. Just had everything kind of served to me on a platter as far as spiritual life goes, and that was an advantage in some ways and a huge disadvantage in other ways. We can get into all of that, but I struggled with a porn addiction for 15 years while I was
Wow.
a pastor's kid and active on worship teams and super involved. I wasn't really the rebel kid, and even struggled when I first started as a pastor myself, and just was frustrated by the lack of resources and tools out there. And so that's why I do what I do today, and that's why I'm super happy to be here. So thanks for having me again.
So I know you told me about pastoring. I knew about you pastoring. I had no idea 4 generations worth. So
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a stigma. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've heard it. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, but people make it seem like pastors' kids are the worst. You know what I mean? It's so much pressure placed on the PK because, in my opinion, it's not that they're the worst. I believe we hold them to a higher standard as though they have to be perfection. So how does that
yeah.
go from being, raised in a godly home to having this struggle? What do you think led to that then? You know what I mean? Because it's one thing if no one else loved God in your home, but everyone did. So how do you think you can fall into a trap like that? How are you exposed to this?
Yeah, bro, let me tell you, being a pastor's kid has all kinds of nuances that are very hard to explain if you haven't experienced it yourself. Are you pastor's kid, Tavares?
No, I'm a preacher's kid.
A preacher's kid? Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
but he
I
wasn't a
got you.
pastor, thank God.
Yeah, yeah. It's not that different. I imagine there's some differences, but
Yeah.
there's just always a built-in expectation of you. I think nobody has to state it. It's just kind of there. Another interesting part of my story is my parents are both Indian. They grew up in India. My mom actually grew up in Malaysia. But Indian culture as well just has its own degree of expectations on kids and layers of shame that come around sexuality and that kind of stuff as well. So, like I mentioned, grew up in a good home. My parents were very consistent people, so I'm fortunate that way where it's not like dad was somebody different off the stage. They were really the same people all around, very reliable that way. But I got exposed to pornography in the computer lab of my Christian school. I was 11 years old. Buddy came up to me and was like, "Yo, check out this website." Very innocent sounding website, I would say, but unfortunately, it's still a pornographic website today. But you would never guess, not in a million years. So I punched it in, and dude, this is like 2001. This is back in the day when you got the big computer monitor, you got the big power button on the front. And as soon as I realized what it was, I was like trying to push that thing in as hard as I possibly could. You're in a public place, and um, the element of being a pastor's kid, even in those moments, is like I have a reputation. I can't let people like I didn't even want to be associated with it. Not that I had made a conscious choice or was really hiding anything, but that's kind of where it all started. And I think the layers of shame that came being a pastor's kid, Indian culture, the stuff I mentioned, it kept me in bondage a lot longer than I needed to be.
Yeah, so I'll say this. There was a time, and I mentioned it on our podcast when I was speaking just by myself, and I said there was a time I was in church, and that's the problem with social media. You have no control over what other people post. So I was in
Right.
church, I was just browsing through Instagram, and then a woman was half dressed. It was crazy, and I was just like, I'm in church. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, so I exited off the app real fast, and I looked around because I didn't want anybody to walk by and think this is what I'm looking up. I was so
Yeah,
thrown
yeah, yeah.
off. But then God convicted me because He was like, you're more concerned about how people are gonna view you rather than what I'm thinking about what you're following. And my thing was,
Uh,
thankfully that wasn't a person that I wasn't following somebody who's raunchy all the time, but it was the fact that I was really more concerned about people than I was concerned about my walk with God. So that thought came back to me because you were saying, PK, I have an image to protect. Do you think a lot
Mm,
of people, for one, a lot of people may have this problem and stay, they'll never confront it because of their image. But do you think a lot of times we're more so focused on how people view our walk with God rather than actually being connected to God Himself? Because I think that's the issue. But what's your viewpoint on that?
it- it's probably the biggest challenge our generation faces because you can be anybody you want online, right? You can put a
So
facade,
true.
you can create a profile, and that gap between what's presented and who you really are is getting wider and wider,
Yeah.
and the avenues of being found out are getting fewer and fewer. There's a lot more anonymity, and one of the greatest manifestations of that is actually how many, especially male Christian leaders, are failing now publicly because that gap has gotten wider and wider. They have a facade online, they have a reputation, an image, a brand, whatever you want to call it, but behind closed doors there's something different going on. And again, not here to like to call out names and point fingers. We don't have to do that today, unless you want we can go there. But I know for me in my own stories that's certainly a huge part of it. And that was the moment where I actually started to really, I would say, experience freedom, was when I closed that gap. It's not when I
Yeah.
narrowed it, it's when I actually shut it and was like, I have to be real about who I actually am behind closed doors. That's when things started to change.
So two things about what you just said that I think are great. The closing the gap, not narrowing the gap, but closing the gap. And I think that was a great
Hmm.
point because a lot of times it's possible that we're not necessarily overcoming sin, but we're avoiding it. It's not like we overcame
Yeah.
anything. We just didn't present ourselves with it. But like if you just shut the door, or like when
Mm.
you the thing about repentance is kind of like burning a bridge. You know what I mean? If you burn it, there's nothing to go back to. God wants us to destroy the past. He wants us to crucify the flesh, but we just pacify it. You know what I mean? So I think it's possible that
Yeah.
a lot of people who are desiring freedom, I genuinely believe they do, but they don't want it bad enough to close the door to all of the open doors that they may have in their heart. So that was a great point. And the second one was anonymity. I never know how to pronounce that, but how easy it is to be anonymous with
Yeah.
pornography. My wife and I, we literally just went to a marriage conference this weekend. We're not going to be posting this episode right when you guys are listening, but we went to a marriage conference this weekend, and they spoke about pornography, and they were saying this is worse than most addictions because of three things: affordability. Pornography is free unless you're one of those people who's wasting your money on OnlyFans or some foolishness. Pornography is free. Accessibility, meaning you can get it absolutely anywhere. Back in the days, you had to get a magazine, you had to get a tape, but no, all you need is a phone nowadays, and almost every single person has a phone or a laptop. And then anonymity. I never know how to say that because it doesn't require, like, you can just be hidden. No one needs to know what you're watching. No one knows what you're doing. So all of those things cannot be found in every other drug. If you're taking meth, someone is going to realize it. You know what I mean? You're buying cocaine, someone is going to realize your money is dwindling. No matter what addiction you have in life, pornography is the only one that is the easiest to become addicted to and the hardest to break. And that's the reason why I was just like, bro, this is a dangerous game, man. And like, so I've been reading a book, and it was a blessing to be on your podcast, but I was like, I have to have you on ours because it's so true. Like, this is a sick addiction that so many people fall into and they don't even realize how. You know what I mean? So it's just like, this is intense, and I don't want to take it too much away from you. I want you to be able to speak to it. So for the people that are listening, I have a question for you. How do I know I have a problem? Or how do I know this is an issue in my life? Because everybody doesn't think they have a problem.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly was in that camp as well. So there's generally three or four criteria that you're looking for. The first is, how long can you go without it, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody always tells themselves, oh, I can stop whenever I want. Well, prove it. So
Yeah.
that would be the first thing. The second thing, one of the greatest indicators that you really do have like an addiction, where this could actually be like clinically diagnosed, is if you are starting to watch it for longer periods of time, you're watching more intense content, or the content that you're accustomed to watching is no longer giving you that kind of fix that you need, and you need to maybe start engaging with somebody in person or that kind of thing. That's a very typical story of the people we work with. It starts out with just soft core stuff, then it
Yeah.
kind of progresses, and then that stuff no longer does it, so they start watching obscure genres, or they start hooking up with people in person. That's like a very typical progression. It happens over long periods of time. A third indicator is when you are failing to basically complete your commitments, whether that's work wise or otherwise. But socially is another big one. So you start canceling on your friends because you're going to stay home. You tell yourself you're not feeling well or whatever, but really you know why. It's so that you can be in your phone on your device watching pornography. And then the fourth one, and I already kind of mentioned this, it's a little bit different, but it's when you start to engage in riskier behavior to get the hit. And so that
Yeah.
would be like watching at work, or your story was by accident, but there are stories of people who in church are watching consciously, intentionally. They literally can't go that long without it.
Yeah.
Those are all indicators where it's like you have a problem, and this is no longer just something you're dabbling in.
All right. So 100% agree with all those points. Those are pretty good. You can tell that those are addiction type behaviors. But that's answering the question, how do I know I have an addiction? So, what do you say
Mm.
to the person who feels as though, well, it may be a little less, but I have it under control? You know what I mean? The person who says, I could watch just a little bit of pornography. What is your advice to those gentlemen or to those ladies who may be saying, well, I've never allowed it to go that far. It will never get that far, but I'm going to just watch a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my question to that person would be how much do you enjoy committing adultery? Because the Bible's super clear
Uh,
that if you've looked at a woman lustfully, right? Jesus went that
wow.
far. If you've looked at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. And he wasn't speaking to just married people when he said that,
Yeah.
right? Because if you go back to like Exodus is one of my favorite books of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. And in the book of Exodus, God is dealing with major idolatry, right? The Israelites have built their golden calves and all that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
interesting, though, the use of the word idolatry, it's certainly there, and it is probably the more prevalent word, but it is at time exchanged for the word adultery. So idolatry is adultery. The idea is if
Yeah.
anything is in your heart that has taken a greater priority than Jesus, him meeting your needs, him being the first person you go to, it is not just that that thing is an idol. It is that actually it has become a mistress in your life. And
Wow.
so when you dabble, even just the second glance, right? Like if you have committed, if you looked at somebody lustfully with your eyes, right? Like that double take, that alone is committing adultery. So
Mm.
the line has to be drawn as firmly as possible. One of the things that drives me crazy, you're talking to a lot of people that are in relationships, and one of the questions we get asked all the time is how far is too far? Bro, as soon as you ask that question, you've already lost.
Yeah.
Because if that's the question you're asking, it's only a matter of time before you go down that slippery slope. The
Yeah.
question is not what can I get away with? The question is not can I handle a little bit of porn? The question is what can I do that's going to be the absolute best for my relationship with God to honor and to serve him. As long as that's the lens we're looking at things through, we would never justify any kind of dabbling in pornography or any other
Mm-hmm.
sexual sin.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. So, a lot of you aim to get to your best self. Me personally, I feel like I'm at my best self when I've been constant in the Word of God and seeking God and church and exercise and having a great time with my family. All those things is when I feel at my best. But to be honest, it's kind of hard to get there unless you are in the right space, both mentally and emotionally. A lot of times we Christians, we only focus on our spiritual, but we also have to focus on our emotional health. And I believe that having therapy in your life can help you with good coping skills, good boundaries, allow you to uncover the things that you're really dealing with and help you learn the necessary tools in order to resolve them. So if you're a person that's thinking about giving therapy a try, I would encourage you to try BetterHelp. They're a great option because it's convenient, flexible, affordable, and it's entirely online. And just fill out a brief questionnaire. And after you finish with that questionnaire, they'll pair you with a therapist, a licensed therapist that you're able to switch at any point in time. So that won't be an issue. So if you would like to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/godly to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/godly. Bro, whew, you came out here to preach today. It's early in the morning we're recording this, man. That's so true, man. And I love the question you asked. You said something along the lines of, how much do you enjoy committing adultery? And it's like we don't take the words of Jesus as serious, you know what I mean? And I know those, it's sadly because of how churches are preaching. All they talk about is
Mm,
God's grace, but we don't talk about how this affects our walk with God. Like we don't talk
mm.
about how God actually views what we're doing. Just because he will forgive you does not mean it's acceptable. You know what I mean? And it's like how much do you really enjoy it? And it really speaks to us who are married men or married women who may be listening to this podcast. Because I know a lot of people who are parents that listen to this to give advice to their kids. And it's not, you think, okay, just a little bit. It's not a problem. Oh, I'm here to learn from it. No, you're not learning from it. It's damaging your mind. And a lot of people, they try to reenact things that they're seeing in these shows, and it's doing nothing but hurting the person they're with. It's nothing but placing unrealistic expectations on the person they're with. And it's like you don't realize not only are you failing yourself, but you're failing your future. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
man, that's a dangerous game. And I love the point that you brought out in regards to idolatry, because a lot of people may not view porn as an idol, but lust is. And then whatever it is
Right.
to feed that lust is what we dive into. So that's why you're going to have the fornication, sex outside of marriage, the adultery, sex outside of your marriage again, whatever it is, feeding into those things. And, Paul tells us to flee fornication. And a lot of people, they only interpret it as running away from sex with my boyfriend or girlfriend. But the word was
Mm,
translated as porneia. That's all forms of sexual perversion,
right.
and where we get our word pornography from. So Paul was telling us you should be running away from these things. And sadly, many of us, we look at it like, oh, just a little bit, and I'm just like, bro, sometimes like you'll check even Twitter and I'm just like, there's no way this is allowed on this app. Because the more I
Yeah.
talk about God, the more I talk about purity, the more I talk about whatever, it seems like my followers either go down or my engagement goes down or whatever it is, it goes downward. But I'm always seeing things going viral with so much sexual perversion. Like it's laced around us in all of Hollywood entertainment. So it's easy for people to stumble, but like I said, this is just something I'm passionate about. That's why I'm talking too much.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I did want to
Can I just add
give,
something real quick?
yeah, please do, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, you made a couple really good points, and I think one thing that people don't realize when you start engaging in any sexual immorality, which and you touched on this, but the Bible's really clear that you're not just to avoid it, you're to flee sexual
Yeah,
immorality, right? But one of the huge detriments of sexual immorality is that it conditions us or it teaches us that our priorities matter over everyone else's.
yeah,
And the reason that it is idolatry to engage in pornography or any other sexual immorality, it's not even it is that lust is the idol, but specifically it is our lust. It is that we actually
correct.
become idols in our own hearts because we
Yeah,
prioritize our own desires and everything else that comes with it.
wow,
The people who watch pornography make the worst lovers because they have learned to prioritize themselves and not serve the other person that's involved. That's why porn in a marriage is so
wow,
devastating.
yeah,
And so it is very, very, very important to understand this, that when you engage in pornography, masturbation, all that kind of stuff, we can try to split hairs over this. And yet, masturbation sometimes falls into a gray area. But the reality is all of this behavior, if you zoom out a little bit, you're just placing yourself above everything else. And
yeah.
that never bodes well from a biblical standpoint in your relationship with God. And certainly it's not going to bode well in a marriage or any kind of long-term committed relationship that somebody listening might want to have.
And it's crazy you say that because I know that's true. And the thing is, I've heard a lot of couples, especially those who are young or they're virgins, so they're like, but I wouldn't know what to do, so I'm just trying to get knowledge. And you don't realize you're teaching yourself is all about feeding me. And there are plenty of people that I
Mm,
know of personally or have done counseling with, and when they speak about being married, they can't be satisfied, both male and female, and it's because of
yes.
years of this addiction. So, how is your wife supposed to compete with the acrobat gymnast who's also on drugs, done surgeries, had to take medication, all those things prior to engaging in the scene? And then a lot of them go through years of abuse. A lot of them go through years. This is literally acting. And now your husband is supposed to come and fulfill you when you've been engaging in this 10 plus years. And it's like they don't realize it's actually harming the marriage that you're praying that God blesses you with. But I did have a question for you, my friend, because you said something pretty bold in your book. Guys, you're going to want to read The Last Relapse. I don't have the camera is not showing clearly because I'm all up in the camera's view. whatever. But it's called The Last Relapse. Realize your potential, reclaim intimacy, and resolve the root issues of porn addiction. I thought that was a genius name, by the way. I'm mad I didn't think of it.
Oh, thanks,
But
man.
you said something real bold, bro. From the very beginning, I was like, oh, this guy's talking serious. You said you prayed a certain prayer. God, until
Yeah.
I am free of pornography, keep my future wife from me. You know, and I said, oh, this dude means business. I said, wow. Hey, listen, guys, you're going to have to get this book, man. Sathiya doesn't play any games. So, my thing is, why did you find that prayer or that mindset necessary? Because there's some people who get married with their porn addiction, they're watching pornography. So, why did you feel as though that mindset was necessary?
It came out of a super rookie mistake. I was talking to a mentor one day, and I was struggling with pornography at the time, and I was in this season where I was starting to pursue freedom, but was not having a lot of luck. And I kind of just said something to the effect of, "Man, I can't wait till I'm married one day, and I won't have to deal with this problem anymore." And his eyes were like the size of, he was like, "Bro, no, 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 no. Like
It's not how
that
this
is not
works.
how this works. Marriage is a magnifier. If it's a problem now, it's a bigger problem later." And
Preach.
just by God's grace, like I trusted him enough, because it's really hard, right? When you're single, you can hear that, but it doesn't always register enough that it actually
Hmm.
impacts our behavior and our decisions. But it hit home in that moment. And that's when I started praying that prayer. It was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do then. Like, because I want to have a healthy marriage like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I know this is gonna be a problem. I believed him. And so that's where that prayer came from. That was a pretty scary prayer. I think in my heart, I was always pretty certain I was gonna get free, not because I was super confident in myself. I just knew that's something God wanted for me. I knew He was
Hmm.
on my side, and so I was pretty confident. But I didn't know how long it was gonna take, and it took way longer than I thought it would. It was about 5 years of really pursuing freedom, while I was still praying that pretty bold prayer.
So let me ask you this for those listening that do have a porn addiction or they watch casually, whatever they find the however amounts they watch it. Do you think it's safe for someone to get married and they're still watching porn on a regular weekly or monthly basis? Do you think that's a wise decision?
Yeah, okay, let me zoom out a little bit and give some of my recovery philosophy to answer this question. One
Yeah.
of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to get free is they count streaks. So it's like 20 days free, 60 days clean, whatever. The problem is when you focus on counting streaks, all you're really concerned with is modifying behavior, which is totally anti-gospel. There it is. Oh man, I was so hoping you'd raise that horn on me. That's awesome. So you're focused on behavior modification, right? Which is totally anti-gospel. The gospel is all about heart transformation.
Yeah.
And as long as the heart is transformed, the behavior will ensue. So what we teach our guys, because our focus is all about getting to the roots, quote unquote, which is really like about transforming the heart. So when you take that approach, we no longer count streaks, we observe trends. And so
Amen.
we just had a
Wow.
client post in a group about this. When he joined the program, month one, 23 relapses. That's not a good month. Month two, 20 relapses. So you're like, okay, 3 days improvement. A lot of people would say like there's nothing flashy about that. But to me, I'm like, that's good. Like you're going in the right direction. Month three, only 8. Month four, only 5. So the trend is going in the correct direction. And we know it's just a matter of time now before that count is 0 and it never goes back up again. But it takes a lot more patience, takes a lot more maturity to go there. And so to answer your question now more directly, for somebody who is in a relationship and the other person's struggling, I'm not asking, are you struggling or are you not struggling? My question is, where's the trend going? And if the trend's going in the right direction, then I think it's okay to have those conversations. I would still definitely recommend you wait until it hits 0 before you move forward. And that might require some really earnest effort from that guy. Maybe you do have to do a program or get some professional help. Do whatever it is that you need to do. But that would be kind of how we'd approach that question.
I think that was an amazing response, because a lot of times people look at it in terms of he struggled 30 days out of the month, right? Addiction, shouldn't get married. I agree, but that's how we view it. 30 days, nah, this dude is way out there. 0 days, and we look at it like, oh, he's perfect. He's ready for marriage. Oh, she hasn't watched it one time all month. She's ready for marriage. Not realizing you can avoid it for 30 days and still have a lust problem. not realizing
Right.
you can still have an issue that you're feeding. So it's not necessarily how often did I watch it, but actually what's in the heart. Because, bro, like you said, man, the gospel is all about Jesus changing who you are. A lot of people, they go to church and they allow Jesus to modify how they dress, allow Jesus to modify their Sunday, Wednesday. But God has never reached inside their heart. Some people said, hey, Lord, I believe, and that's it. And it's just like, no, God is actually aiming to work on your heart. So I think it's key, and obviously, like you said, it would be ideal if this dude is up there, we see that number stay towards zero and never go back up again. But the point is understanding the direction that this person is going, because I genuinely don't believe that every person is going to go on a marriage completely free from every form of lust, because a lot of people, they don't realize the need to work on some things until they get married, unfortunately. You know what I mean? But no person
Yeah.
is perfect in every single aspect in general. But I do think it's wise that we make sure we're developing the trends towards purity. And I always say it since I heard this quote from a guy, but he said, purity is not a destination, but it's a pursuit. And like you said, bro, a lot of
Mm.
times we just focus on, oh, I've been free for a year. Dude, you know how many times I've been free for X amount of time? The point is not a matter of
Yeah.
now I'm not counting days. I'm just trying to walk in purity. And that's the problem. We focus so much on when's my last relapse? No. Are you walking in purity now? Are you walking in God's will now? Are you walking in holiness, walking according to the word, whatever, so it's not necessarily the goal. The goal should be we're not having any of those falls, but are we obeying what God is telling us today? And that's what you do
Yeah. Yeah.
every day. So as we follow Jesus every day,
Exactly.
he orders those steps. So I just thought that was a great response, but I'm not going to keep you
Can
too
can I add
long.
one thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, man. Can I? Sorry. I just want to add something real quick. If somebody really adopts this mindset, the other thing it does is it means that when you do have a relapse or setback, you can zoom out and see it for what it really is. Which what we always encourage this to our clients. We're like, this is a bump in the road. This is not a setback. This is not a derailment. You just get to decide this is a bump in the road. Let's learn from it. Obviously, you have to figure out what was going on, lean into those roots a little bit, do the work. But it doesn't just change the way we look at like someone's condition, the direction they're going in. If somebody really gets this mentality, they're actually able to leverage relapses or mistakes and help them propel them forward instead of it being like this big setback and woe is me. So I just want to add that in because it is a struggle, and it takes usually several attempts and efforts before somebody really can start getting the momentum going in the right direction.
I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's an amazing book by Craig Groeschel, and I can't remember everything because I didn't take notes on it. But he was speaking on how the mind works, winning the war in your mind. He was speaking how the mind works on how, when we make our habits, like it places like these dents in our mind, and we form the neural pathways in our minds. It's like it's not up to you to determine I'm gonna wake up and brush my teeth. You've done it so much that you're going to wake up and brush your teeth whether someone tells you to or not. So when you think about someone who had a
Yeah.
pornography addiction, every time they check social media, it was in the back of their mind to check on it, something inappropriate. So often that even now when they're living for God, they may open Instagram one day, end up on a porn site or whatever, Pornhub or whatever inappropriate site there is. And before they realize it, now they're like, oh, because it's in their mind that you've already made a habit. So now it's a matter of
Mm.
reframing your mind, allowing God to renew your mind through his word. Because it's easy that when you see something, your first instinct is to double take, like how you mentioned, we shouldn't be taking that second look. But because you've been taking a second glance for years, now you have to realize like, oh no, God has delivered me from that, so you don't have to take that next look. So that's why I just like, it's good that you pointed that out because people need to understand that if you fall again, we're not saying, God is condemning you to hell. We're letting you know it's also something that is going on in your brain that you don't realize. That's the reason why the Holy Spirit is needed in the life of every individual, because only God is going to renew your mind. Only the Holy Spirit can make a
Yeah.
person live holy. So great points, bro. But yeah, like I said, I don't want to hold you too long, but I do want to ask, what are some practical tips you'd give for the person who they want to be free, but they constantly find themselves struggling? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, so like we've been saying, one of the classic mistakes we've made is we've tried to modify behavior, and I kind of equate that with running over a weed with a lawnmower. As long as the root system's there, the weed is going to grow back. So what we want
Wow.
to do, if we really want to have any kind of lasting freedom, we want to actually get to the heart of the matter. We want to get underneath the surface and figure out what's going on. We have kind of I would say like a three-step framework that we've used that's worked really well. It's building self-awareness, healing of the heart, that'd be like working through past traumas and that kind of stuff, and then establishing your identity in Christ. Everything starts with building self-awareness though. If you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. So if you don't know why you're having relapses, if you don't know why these slips are taking place, you're a victim. You're totally helpless to actually make any kind of lasting progress. So that's where it starts. And there's two ways that people can do that are listening. The first is talk to somebody that you feel safe with. If you have somebody like that in your life, bring them in, discuss the regular occurrences of your life, and have those regular conversations goes a super long way. The second thing is journaling. So for people who maybe don't want to talk to another person, journal, bring God into it. And we always ask two questions to get the ball rolling when you journal, which is, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And so on a real practical level, that would be a great place for your audience to kind of get the ball rolling.
But before I let you go, bro, any last words or thoughts to in any aspect in regards to pornography, whether it's male, female, married, single, what is it that you would like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, what I would love to leave with your audience is this. In February 2016, that was when I had my last relapse. November 2016 is when I met Shaloma, who's now been my wife of about 3 years as we record this. And so we were talking about praying those bold prayers. God hears those, and you have to remember, God is more excited about your freedom than you are. And so
Wow.
don't be afraid to pray something bold. Don't be afraid to invite him into this process. And as long as you stay surrendered, you'll be amazed at what God can do. And if people are looking for more stuff, obviously they can check out the podcast, the book, all that stuff's available. If a guy's listening, he wants some more help, we set aside time every week to speak with guys that are serious and maybe looking to participate in a program. All those options are available, and maybe we can throw some links in the show notes of ours. That'd be great.
All right, guys, there you have it. I enjoyed this episode. But this guy, man, this guy is a blessing to the body. I think you guys are going to enjoy this episode when we play it back, but I will have his information in the bio below. The Last Relapse. Hopefully this is showing on the camera. Am I too close to the camera? Sathiyas, Sam, amazing episode. And then when you're on Amazon, make sure you go grab Golly Dating 101 as well. You know, I had to plug myself. You know, I'm sorry. God is working on me. But this episode was a blessing. If you're dealing with this, don't feel ashamed. God is more excited about your freedom than you are. Man, that's mind-blowing that God wants to see you free. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to let the struggle define you. I know God has great plans in store for you, and we'll see you guys again next week. Peace.